My name is Sarah Ellison. I'm 35 years old. And I didn't realize my marriage was already over until the night my husband raised his glass at our 5th anniversary dinner, smiling like he owned the room, and turned me into the punchline everyone would remember. It was a Saturday evening in early spring. Our house smelled like garlic and rosemary, the kind of rich, comforting scent that's supposed to wrap you in warmth and celebration. Instead, it felt heavy, almost staged, like everything was dressed up for a performance I hadn't agreed to be part of. We had 6 couples around the long dining table, friends from work, college, the gym, expensive bottles of red breathing on the sideboard, plates passing back and forth, laughter a little too loud. The way it gets when people are trying to convince themselves they're having the perfect night. I sat next to Blake, my husband of 5 years, 33, charming when he wanted to be. And tonight he definitely wanted to be. I was nursing my second glass of sparkling water. I'd learned long ago that if Blake was drinking, he was performing, and when he performed, someone usually ended up bleeding. Usually me. Halfway through dessert, one of the guys, I think it was Matt, leaned forward with that tipsy grin people get when they think they're being clever. "So," he said, swirling his wine, "5 years, come on, you two, how do you keep the fire alive?" The table chuckled, waiting for some cute, flirty answer. I felt my stomach tighten. Not because the question was bad. Because I saw the glint in Blake's eyes, the one that said he'd just found his opening. He laughed, that big, confident laugh he saves for an audience, and leaned back in his chair like the whole room belonged to him. "The fire?" he repeated, turning to me with a smirk. He lifted his glass in my direction, red wine sloshing dangerously close to the edge. "Let me tell you about our love life." My fingers curled around my fork. I knew what was coming. The same way you feel thunder in your chest before the storm actually breaks. Blake ignored the quiet warning in my eyes. He never saw warnings, only spotlights. "Sarah's idea of foreplay," he said, voice carrying easily across the table, "is asking if I'm ready yet." The room exploded into awkward laughter. The kind people force out when they're not sure if they're allowed to be uncomfortable. A couple of the guys snorted. One of the wives gave a nervous, high-pitched giggle. I kept my face still. I didn't give him the reaction he was fishing for. Blake warmed to it, leaning forward now, elbows on the table like he was sharing a secret everyone was dying to hear. And then it's just mechanical. Like she's checking items off a list. Same order, same everything. I could literally set a timer. He paused for effect, then held up his fingers, measuring an invisible distance in the air. 4 minutes, maybe 4.5 if I'm lucky. More laughter, louder from the men, thinner from the women. Someone's glass clinked too hard against a plate. I tasted metal in my mouth, like I'd bitten the inside of my cheek without noticing. Blake grinned wider, delivering what he thought was the killer line. "The worst part? She actually thinks she's good. Like, genuinely believes she's blowing my mind. Bless her heart." That's when the voice came from the other end of the table. Low, calm, almost bored. "Funny," Ethan Caldwell said, looking straight at Blake, "because from personal experience, Sarah's incredible in bed." The room went dead silent. A fork scraped against porcelain somewhere. Someone swallowed too loudly. The air felt thick, like it had stopped moving altogether. Blake's smile froze, then cracked. Ethan didn't flinch. He just took a slow sip of his drink and added, quietly, definitely not reading from any checklist. I didn't say a word. I just looked at my husband and watched the color drain from his face as the truth settled over the table like smoke. Because that moment, right there, wasn't the beginning of the end. It was the end of a very long, very patient game. And Blake had no idea he'd already lost. Blake stared at Ethan like he'd just been slapped. Then his eyes snapped to me, wide and glassy, searching for some sign that this was all a joke. "Sarah," he said, his voice dropping low, trying to sound controlled, "tell me he's lying." I looked at him for a long moment. Really looked at him. At the man who'd kissed me goodbye that morning like everything was fine. At the man who'd been humming in the shower 24 hours earlier. Completely unaware the walls were already closing in. I took a slow sip of my sparkling water, set the glass down gently, and said, calm and clear, "He's not lying." The room erupted in the quietest way possible. A sharp intake of breath. A curse muttered under someone's breath. A wine glass tipping over and spilling red across the white tablecloth like blood nobody wanted to clean up. Blake's face cycled through colors, flushed, pale, flushed again. He stood up so fast his chair scraped hard against the hardwood. You cheated on me? His voice cracked on the last word, like he couldn't believe the universe would dare. I leaned back a little in my chair, folded my hands in my lap, and held his gaze. About the same time you started disappearing for those late client meetings. I said softly, remember those? His mouth opened, closed, for the first time in years. Blake Ellison had nothing to say. I let the silence sit there for a beat, let everyone feel how heavy it was. Then I turned slightly toward the table, not raising my voice, just enough for every person to hear. Before any of you decide what kind of woman that makes me, I said, let me back up a little. Because tonight wasn't the beginning of anything. It was the end. And to really understand how perfectly this all came together, you need to know what Blake did first. I paused, just long enough for the weight of that sentence to land. It started 4 weeks ago, on a quiet Tuesday morning, when Blake left his phone on the kitchen island. It started 4 weeks ago, on a quiet Tuesday morning, when Blake left his phone on the kitchen island. We'd always had that easy kind of trust, or at least I thought we did. Phones got left out all the time. No passwords, no sneaking. Looking back, that should have been my first red flag. But on that particular morning, I wasn't looking for anything. I was just rinsing out my coffee mug when the screen lit up. Once, twice. A preview popped up. Madison. Can't wait for tomorrow night. Wear the blue shirt again? Madison. I knew the name. She was the coworker he'd mentioned more and more over the last few months. The one who really gets the pressure he's under. The one he stayed late with for strategy sessions. My stomach dropped, but I told myself there could be an explanation. There's always that first second where your mind tries to protect you. Then another text came through. I picked up the phone, unlocked it. His passcode was still our wedding date, which somehow made it worse, and opened the thread. 7 months. 7 full months of messages, photos, inside jokes, hotel confirmations, lunch dates that turned into entire afternoons gone. But the cheating wasn't what hollowed me out. It was the way he talked about me when I wasn't there. I scrolled, thumb shaking. Madison. When are you finally leaving her? Blake. Soon. She's useful for now. Useful. Like I was a convenient appliance. Blake. She handles everything at home. Never complains. Basically a live-in maid who pays half the mortgage. My breath caught in my throat. Madison. Doesn't sound like much of a wife. Blake. She's not. Boring as hell. I have to fake every reaction in bed or she'd fall apart. I sat down hard at the kitchen table. Blake. Last time I literally planned out my fantasy football lineup while she was on top. The words blurred for a second. I blinked hard. There were more, so many more. He mocked the way I dressed, the way I laughed, the little routines I kept that made his life run smoothly. He called me easy to control, said he'd settled because I was stable, that I was safe, that I was there. And then the one that carved something permanent out of me. Blake. She's so predictable I could script our nights. Thinks she's passionate, bless her heart. I don't know how long I sat there, long enough for the coffee to go cold. But I didn't cry, I didn't scream. Something inside me went very, very quiet. I took screenshots of everything, every message, every photo, every date. I emailed them to an account Blake didn't know existed. Then I cleared the search history, set the phone back exactly where he'd left it, made his favorite breakfast, and kissed him goodbye like the world hadn't just tilted off its axis. That afternoon, during my lunch break, I called a lawyer. By the end of the week, I knew exactly how strong my position was. No kids. Ironclad proof of infidelity. The house in my name from before we married. Most assets clearly separate. The lawyer was straightforward. If you want this clean and fast, she said, you're in a very good place. I did want it clean. But not yet. Because by then, I'd started noticing something else. Blake had begun asking questions. Gentle, supportive questions. So, any word on that big promotion? They mentioned the new salary range yet? Equity package sound pretty sweet. Huh? He'd never cared that much about my career before. And suddenly, everything clicked into place. He wasn't cheering me on. He was waiting. Counting. Planning. The call came on a Thursday morning. Out of nowhere. I was at my desk, halfway through answering emails, when my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in years, Olivia Hart. Blake's ex, the one he'd always brushed off with a shrug and an ancient history. I let it ring twice, then picked up. Sarah, she said, no hello, no small talk. Her voice was low, tight, like she was holding something sharp. Can we meet? Today if possible. My fingers stilled on the keyboard. About what? Not over the phone. That edge in her tone made the decision for me. We agreed on a little diner 2 blocks from my office, faded booths. Burnt coffee, the kind of place nobody lingers. Olivia was already there when I walked in, sitting in the back corner with an untouched mug in front of her. She looked exactly like the photos I'd seen years ago, only harder around the eyes. You're going to want to sit, she said as I slid in across from her. I did. She studied me for a second, then nodded, like she'd just confirmed something. I ran into someone from Blake's firm yesterday. She started, a woman in our. She mentioned Blake and a coworker, Madison. I kept my expression neutral. Go on. Olivia's eyes narrowed slightly. You already know. I do. How long? 4 weeks. And you haven't confronted him? No. She exhaled slowly through her nose. Smart. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, unlocked it, and slid it across the table. Notes, dates, names. 2 weeks ago, she said quietly, Blake met with a divorce attorney. Morning appointment. He's not filing yet, he's waiting. My pulse picked up, but I didn't look away from the screen. Waiting for what? Olivia's mouth twisted, not quite a smile. For your promotion to go through. Bigger salary, bigger settlement. Everything lined up in one cold, clean snap. The sudden interest in my bonus structure. The gentle nudges to accept the offer quickly. The way he'd started talking about our future like it was a joint investment. He hadn't been proud of me. He'd been positioning himself. I handed the phone back. How did you get this? Friend of a friend overheard him on a call in the parking garage. Told the attorney to have papers ready, but hold off a few weeks. Said he needed to lock everything down. The diner suddenly felt too warm, too close. Olivia watched me carefully. I didn't reach out because I still care about Blake, she said. I reached out because I hate him. I believed her. She leaned in a little. He did the same thing to me. Built me up, made promises, then lined up his next move before I was even out the door. We sat there for a moment, 2 women tied together by one man's pattern. Not friends, not exactly allies, but aligned. I folded my hands on the table. Thank you. She hesitated. What are you going to do? I let the question settle, felt the anger cool into something steady and useful. I'm going to finish what he started, I said, just not the way he expects. A real smile flickered across her face this time, sharp, satisfied. If you need dates, details, anything, I've got them. I will, I said, and when I do, I'll ask. We didn't hug when we left. We didn't need to. Sometimes revenge doesn't require warmth. It just needs perfect timing. And Blake had no idea the timer had already started. Once you know someone's lying to you, everything they do turns into evidence. Every smile feels calculated, every casual question has an agenda. Even the way they touch you starts to feel like reassurance for themselves. Not connection. I started watching Blake the way you watch a chess opponent once you've seen their strategy. He came home that night after my meeting with Olivia in a great mood, too great. Humming as he kicked off his shoes, dropping his bag by the door like nothing in his world was burning. Hey, beautiful, he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind while I stood at the stove. You seem tired. I am, I answered honestly. Long day. He didn't hear the distance in my voice. He never did. Over dinner he talked about work, about deadlines, about how some people don't get the credit they deserve. Then, right on cue, he steered it exactly where he wanted. So, he said lightly, swirling his wine, any update on that promotion? I took a slow bite. Chewed, swallowed. Nothing official yet. His eyes flickered, just for a fraction of a second. Well, when it lands, he smiled, reaching for my hand, it's going to be huge for us. For us. I nodded. Yeah, it would have been. That night, after he fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I thought about Olivia's voice in the diner. About the screenshots still saved in my hidden folder. About the way Blake had described me to Madison: useful, predictable, safe. And I realized the deepest cut wasn't the affair. It was that he didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as a stepping stone. So I stopped waiting. The next morning I moved quietly, carefully. I scanned every important document: deeds, titles, bank statements, insurance policies. I changed passwords on every account that mattered. I backed everything up to a cloud drive he didn't know existed. By the following Wednesday, I'd signed a lease on a small one-bedroom across town. Nothing fancy, just mine. Thursday, I scheduled movers for the Saturday after the anniversary party. Friday, I opened a new checking account and transferred my half of our joint savings, quietly. Legally, permanently. Blake noticed nothing. He was too busy texting. Olivia stayed in touch only when I asked, sending me dates, names, receipts that proved the affair violated company policy. She didn't push. She knew better than to crowd me. And then I made the move he never saw coming. I called my boss. I've thought about the promotion, I told him, and I need a little more time. I'm going to turn it down for now. Personal priorities. There was a long pause on the line. You sure? This is a big one. I'm sure. When I hung up, my hands were shaking, not from fear, from power. Blake had been waiting for that promotion like a gambler waiting for the final card. I'd just pulled the entire deck out from under him. That same evening, he came home practically glowing. Tomorrow's going to be perfect, he said, spinning me around the kitchen, finally showing everyone how great we are. I smiled into the sink where I was washing dishes. Yeah, I said softly, it really will be. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Olivia. He's bragging to half the office. Thinks he's untouchable. I dried my hands slowly. Good, I typed back. Let him. By the time I crawled into bed that night, everything was locked in place. Financially, legally, emotionally. I was already gone. Blake just hadn't realized it yet. And tomorrow, in front of every person he wanted to impress, he was going to find out exactly what happens when you mistake silence for weakness. By the time the last guest arrived, Blake was already on his third drink. He'd changed shirts twice before settling on the crisp blue one Madison liked, the one he thought made him look successful. In control, I noticed. I always noticed. I smoothed the tablecloth one last time, adjusted the centerpiece, and gave him a small smile. Relax, I said softly, it's just dinner. Exactly, he grinned, scanning the room like a host surveying his kingdom. Just dinner. People trickled in, handing over bottles of wine, complimenting the food, laughing at Blake's easy jokes. He soaked it all up, kissed cheeks, told stories that always put him at the center, played the perfect husband. I stayed quiet, I watched, I waited. The roast came sooner than I expected. Blake barely let the plates get cleared before he leaned back, glass raised, eyes bright with alcohol and attention. And then Ethan spoke. From the far end of the table, calm as ever. Because from personal experience, Sarah's incredible in bed. The silence that followed felt physical, like the air had been sucked out of the room. Blake's grin froze mid-air. Ethan took another slow sip, then added, almost gently, definitely not reading from any checklist. I let the quiet stretch, let it press down on everyone. Blake's knuckles went white around his glass. Sarah, he said, voice tight, trying to stay in control. Tell them he's full of it. I looked at him, really looked. Then I spoke, soft enough that everyone had to lean in. I saw your phone, Blake, 4 weeks ago. Madison, 7 months of messages, the hotels, the plans. A gasp rippled around the table. You left it on the island. I continued, steady. I read everything. How you called me useful. A placeholder, an obedient roommate who pays half the bills. Someone's chair creaked as they shifted uncomfortably. You told her you were waiting to leave me until my promotion finalized, so you could take more. Blake stood up so fast his chair screeched against the floor. That's not. I turned it down. I said quietly, yesterday, the promotion, so whatever you were counting on, it's gone. The color drained from his face completely. I reached into the drawer of the sideboard beside me, slowly, deliberately, and placed a thick folder on the table. I've already filed, I said. You'll be served Monday. Figured I'd save everyone the drama of wondering. No one spoke. Then one of the wives, Monica, I think, stood abruptly. We should go, she mumbled, grabbing her bag. Within 2 minutes the room emptied. Apologies whispered, eyes averted, coats grabbed in a rush. The door clicked shut behind the last guest. And then it was just the three of us. Blake, me, and the life he thought he was about to cash in on, crumbling in front of him. Blake stood there in the middle of our dining room, chest rising and falling too fast, staring at the folder like it might explode. This is my house too, he said, voice hoarse. You can't just. It's not. I cut in gently. It's in my name. Always has been. You can take a bag tonight. The rest we'll sort through lawyers. He laughed then, a sharp, broken sound. You're serious? You're really doing this? Yes. Something shifted in his eyes. The anger slid into desperation. Sarah, come on. We can fix this. Counseling, a trip, whatever you need. I looked at him and felt nothing. You don't love me, Blake, I said quietly. You love what I did for you. There's a difference. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Behind him, Ethan stayed silent, watching. Blake glanced between us, realizing too late that he'd lost in front of a witness. The days after the dinner weren't loud. They were eerily quiet. Blake tried calling the next morning. I let it ring. Then came the texts. Angry ones. Long apologetic ones. Voice notes that swung from blame to begging. By Saturday I blocked his number. That weekend I moved. The movers came early, just as planned. I stood in the doorway and watched them carry boxes past Blake's untouched side of the closet, shirts still hanging. Shoes lined up like he might walk back in any minute. He didn't. By Sunday night I was sitting cross-legged on the floor of my new apartment, eating pad thai straight from the carton, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Real, bone-deep relief. Monday morning my lawyer emailed, papers served. That same afternoon my phone rang with a number I still recognized, Matt. One of the guys from the dinner. Sarah, he said, voice low, have you heard about Blake? No, what? They fired him, like, security escorted him out fired. I closed my eyes. HR got an anonymous tip. He went on, proof of policy violations, a lot of it. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Olivia called an hour later. Satisfaction practically humming through the phone. I sent everything, she said, screenshots, hotel receipts, dates. They didn't even hesitate. Madison's gone too. I waited. We make a good team, don't we? No, I said calmly, we don't. Silence. You used me to burn him. I continued, that's fine, but this ends here. She scoffed, but I was already hanging up. I blocked her too. 2 weeks later, on a quiet Wednesday evening, someone started pounding on my apartment door. Not knocking, pounding. I looked through the peephole and almost laughed. Blake and Olivia. In the hallway. Yelling at each other. I opened the door. You ruined my life, Blake shouted the second he saw me. You did that yourself, I said. He turned to Olivia. You sent those emails. I didn't, I said evenly. She did. They spun toward each other like magnets repelling. The argument exploded, shoving. Accusations. Years of resentment boiling over in seconds. Olivia. You thought you were untouchable. Blake. You've always been jealous. Then a shove, a slap. Blake stumbled back, hand to his mouth. Blood. You chipped my tooth, he mumbled, staring at his palm. I couldn't help it. I laughed. I laughed so hard I had to grip the doorframe to stay upright. They both turned to me, stunned. You think this is funny? Blake demanded, blood on his lip. Yes, I said, wiping tears from my eyes. It really is. He stepped toward me, hands out, pleading. Sarah, I messed up. I know, but we can still. Olivia cut in. He doesn't deserve you. Nobody does. I looked at them both, one bleeding, one scratched, both still thinking I was a prize to be claimed. No, I said clearly, neither of you does. They started up again. I raised my phone. 5 seconds, or I call the police. They froze. Olivia backed away first, muttering. Blake lingered one last second, searching my face for anything soft. He found nothing. They left. The hallway went quiet. I closed the door, locked it, slid the chain, walked to the kitchen, reheated leftover pizza, sat at the counter, took one bite, and laughed again. Not because it was funny, but because for the first time in years, I felt free. I felt whole. I felt like me again. And nobody, no affair, no manipulation, no public humiliation, could ever take that away. If you've ever stayed quiet longer than you should have, if you've ever planned your way out of something toxic, if you've ever chosen yourself when it felt like the hardest thing in the world, know this. Your silence isn't weakness. It's the space where your strength grows. And when you're ready, you'll walk away winning. Not because you destroyed them, but because you finally stopped letting them dim you. Thank you for listening.